Well, hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson at Telemundo Center in Miami. Good to be with you on this Friday, February 11th, and tonight it seems like things are heating up in Ukraine. The White House says a Russian attack looks increasingly likely, maybe during the Olympics. President Biden plans to speak with Russia's Vladimir Putin tomorrow morning. We'll have analysis of the latest efforts to prevent war. Did the New York Times defame Sarah Palin? Her lawsuit went to the jury this evening. What might this case mean for the Times and for the First Amendment? Then parents of small children will have to wait a bit longer to vaccinate them against COVID. Pfizer pulled its vaccine application. We've been wondering out loud about whether Russia will invade Ukraine and when. Based on what the Biden administration said today, it could be very soon.
We encourage all American citizens who remain in Ukraine to depart immediately. We want to be crystal clear on this point. Any American in Ukraine should leave as soon as possible, and in any event, in the next 24 to 48 hours.
The administration says Russia could invade Ukraine before the end of the Winter Olympics. The Games have 9 days left. Officials called that a distinct possibility. Now, to be clear, a full-scale invasion is not a certainty, but the U.S. says it's ready either way. The White House is not planning to send troops specifically to defend Ukraine, but still, 3,000 more soldiers are deploying to that region. That'll put nearly 5,000 total in Eastern Europe. President Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin had planned to speak by phone on Monday. Instead, they moved those plans up to tomorrow morning. The White House says it suggested the shift and Russia agreed. What might they say to each other? And how might that change this standoff? Let's get into that with retired U.S. Army Colonel and Medal of Honor recipient Jack Jacobs, also former U.S. Ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul. Both men are NBC News analysts. Good to have both of you with us. And Colonel Jacobs, I wonder if I might start with what President Biden told Lester Holt in part of their interview yesterday. Watch.
What scenarios would you put American troops to rescue and get Americans out?
There's not. That's a world war. When Americans and Russians start shooting at one another, we're in a very different world than we've ever been in.
Colonel, could you just level set for us a bit? The President of the United States using the phrase world war is a little jarring. Is that really what we're looking at?
No, I don't think we're looking at that at all, and I think it's unlikely we're going to send troops to do anything other than what we've already done. We've got troops in Poland, not to fight or defend Poland against the Russian invasion, but to shore up our alliances to demonstrate that we're really interested in defending, that we're going to do what we need to do to defend our allies in Western and Eastern Europe. So, we're not going to use troops to fight. I don't think that there's a world war in the offing. There's always the possibility of a miscalculation. Whether there's a big invasion or a small invasion by Putin, but at the end of the day, there's no large-scale war that's on the horizon.
Well, Colonel, that's what I was going to ask you about, is the possibility of a miscalculation. As soon as you said that, I thought of that old quote from Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. I mean, if you're putting troops near what could become a war zone, like, how do you know that they won't get pulled into something? Are they just going to, like, stand by if Russia invades?
Well, one of the things we do with soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines is that we always have operations plans on the shelf ready to execute that have been tested out in field training exercises, in command post exercises, and so on. Those troops are there pursuant to these operations plans, and I'd be willing to bet that none of them includes an incursion into Ukraine. I think we're going to avoid that at all costs. As a matter of fact, our focus has always been on using non-military means of either deterring Putin not to invade, or to punish Russia if they do invade. Diplomacy on the one hand, and certainly economic sanctions that will be crippling if they're put to use.
Ambassador McFaul, I wonder what your sense is of this phone call that's going to happen tomorrow. We just got a readout of a call that France's President Emmanuel Macron had with President Biden and other world leaders, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of Italy, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, the President of Poland, Romania, the European Commission, the European Council, and the Secretary General of NATO. That call happened today. Biden and Putin talk tomorrow. What else is there to talk about?
Well, I think what you're seeing is that there's new intelligence. So I don't know it, of course, but it's just being reported that it feels like we're getting closer to a military invasion, an escalation, because there's already war there. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, would not say what he said today, telling Americans to leave unless something has changed. That's a pretty extraordinary event when you have the National Security Advisor getting on national television telling Americans to leave Ukraine. And there are lots of Americans in Ukraine, by the way. So I think something's changed. And my guess is they want to have this call tomorrow and moving it to Saturday rather than Monday to just, one, warn President Putin yet again of the disastrous consequences for his country, for his economy, should he invade. And two, to emphasize again that if he wants to talk about European security, the president is ready to have that conversation. They've made that clear. I think you'll have both of those messages delivered one more time tomorrow.
I do want to note, by the way, that list of the people on that call, that comes from the French government, from the Élysée, which is the palace of the French president. Ambassador, also, there's been this formal request from Ukraine asking Russia to provide some detailed explanations of their military activities. They're citing an agreement called the Vienna document and paragraph 3 of the Vienna document to try to get more information from Russia. How would that work?
Well, the Vienna documents and actually many others, I just wrote a piece about this today in Foreign Affairs, was developed at the end of the Cold War, after the Cold War, starting with Helsinki, but then a number of agreements were signed. The Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty, Vienna documents, there's 2 of them. Basically, that's a document to help provide transparency about where forces are, where weapons are, and their movements. The sad truth is that they haven't been working very well. Including the Vienna document. Russia has basically abrogated many of those treaties or is not providing information to many others.
Colonel Jacobs, let's take the possible worst case scenario and say Russia does invade Ukraine soon. Invade again, I should note, because they already invaded once. That it invades Ukraine again soon, maybe in the next few days before the Olympics are up. Talk about the military posture, not just from the U.S., but from other NATO allies who are watching this, and how they determine what they do with troops that they've positioned.
Well, with respect to Ukraine itself, we've done all we're going to do. I think all we can do. We provided them with materiel, with advice, with weapons and so forth. For the allies, it's a different story. There are 2 scenarios, actually 3. One scenario is that Putin says, these were actually just war games, field training exercises, and we're going home. Another possibility is that he conducts a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. If that happens, I think we've got the backing of all of NATO, all of our allies, to do what we need to do, which principally is going to be to engage in crippling sanctions, the most significant of which is removing Russia from the SWIFT system that permits them to be paid and for them to pay for anything internationally. That will be a disaster for Russia. The worst possible scenario
is
something less than that. The worst scenario is something less than that. The Russian forces inch their way slightly into Ukraine under the support of fifth columnists, Russians inside, facilitators and so on, but doesn't go into a full-scale invasion. That will be extremely difficult for the allies because some of our allies will not necessarily be supportive under those circumstances of the kinds of sanctions that would really cripple Putin. Joshua.
I know we're out of time, but Ambassador, really quickly, suppose that first scenario that Colonel Jacobs mentioned happens, that the Russians are like, we're going home, and they just walk away. Does that mean the international community is just like, oh, well, I guess it's cool because nothing bad happened? Or do they take action against Russia anyway to kind of smack them for putting us through all of this?
Well, they should smack them. I'm using your verb, not mine. But I think that's highly unlikely, because the whole world thinks that there's going to be a massive military invasion. And when it doesn't happen, there's going to be a sigh of relief and everybody's going to want to just walk away. And those middle grounds that the Colonel talked about, those are the really tricky ones, because those are the ones where we should react, but maybe not everybody will want to react.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, Ambassador Michael McFaul, really appreciate you explaining this to us, especially something that's moving this fast and changing this quickly. Gentlemen, thank you both very much. Still to come, Sarah Palin's lawsuit against the New York Times is heading to a jury. The defense says this trial could affect freedom of the press. We're glad you're with us from Miami for Now Tonight from NBC News. One of my favorite sayings is known as Hanlon's razor. To paraphrase it, some people are malicious, but it's more likely they're just stupid. That might be at the heart of a lawsuit against the New York Times brought by Sarah Palin. She's suing the Times for libel and defamation. This started with a Times editorial from 2017 titled America's Lethal Politics. It was published right after a shooting in Alexandria, Virginia. You may remember 24 Republican congressmen were practicing for the annual congressional baseball game. The shooting severely wounded Congressman Steve Scalise. Turns out the attacker had a history of anti-Republican activities. The New York Times editorial questioned just how vicious American politics had become. It brought up a shooting in Arizona from 2011. That was the attack that wounded Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. Here's where the malice versus stupidity thing comes into play. The editorial in the Times implied a link between the shooting of Congresswoman Giffords and a map circulated by Sarah Palin's Political Action Committee. Now, that version was corrected the next day, and the Times correction noted that the original version, quote, incorrectly stated that a link existed between political rhetoric and the 2011 shooting of Representative Gabby Giffords. In fact, no such link was established, unquote. The correction does not mention Ms. Palin by name, but she claimed that the editorial made her feel, in her words, powerless, and her team stressed that the Times did not apologize. In his closing statement today, the paper's attorney called the case incredibly important because, quote, it is about the freedom of the press, unquote. And the Times maintains that the corrected text was just a mistake. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now to break down the case. Danny, did anything from the trial stand out to you that might hint at how it will turn out?
Yes and no. In a sense, there wasn't much to be tried in this case because everything is literally already in black and white. We know what the article says. We know what the Times printed almost just a day later. They have essentially admitted it was a mistake. Even Sarah Palin's testimony really was more about her damages. It wasn't about liability in the sense that nothing she was going to say would change what the Times printed and then what they unprinted or took back the next day. So the only real question for the jury is really the application of these facts to the law and whether or not this mistake amounted to reckless disregard for the truth, which is called constitutional malice after a case called New York Times v. Sullivan way back in the 60s, the Supreme Court case. That's the standard that a public figure like Sarah Palin has to prove. If you're just a private figure, someone who isn't in the spotlight, all you have to show is negligence. But if you're famous, and Sarah Palin's one of the most famous people among public figures, she's going to have to prove a higher burden, and that is reckless disregard, not just negligence, but that essentially the reporters stuck their fingers in their ears, closed their eyes to the truth, and plowed on ahead.
Since we've got this case, I think people kind of throw the words libel and slander and defamation around without a lot of precision. Can you just define those for us real fast? What are libel and slander and defamation? How do we differentiate those from just somebody who insults you or who satirizes you?
I am so glad you asked that question because defamation law maybe one of the most misunderstood areas by the public. If you ask any lawyer how many calls they've gotten from someone who claims that their Aunt Edna defamed them on Facebook and they want to sue, every lawyer is going to tell you that they've gotten that call. Then ask the second question. How many of those lawyers have taken that case? It's going to be 0.0. And I'll tell you why. Because the vast majority of defamation cases may exist in theory, but practically speaking, they're not interesting or palatable to an attorney. And that's because, for the most part, a private person defamed by another private person who probably lives in mom's basement, that person doesn't have any assets to go after. And since the New York Times doesn't write about people that aren't newsworthy, a private figure isn't often going to find themselves suing the Times. It's these cases, Palin v. Times, and defamation is the main category. Libel is basically written, slander is spoken, but they're both defamation. It is a false statement that causes somebody harm when it's published. And the standard, of course, normally the baseline is negligence. But the reality is most of these major cases involve public figures. So someone like Sarah Palin has to prove by clear and convincing evidence that the Times or the people, the authors or architects of this article were recklessly disregarding the truth. Not just that they didn't meet journalistic standards, because that's negligence. They have to do a lot more than that, which is why most legal experts have and observers have said that Sarah Palin has an uphill battle here. But her battle is not so much legal. She knows that she is rolling the dice and could potentially deal a huge blow to a branch of journalism that she's not a fan of.
And before I got to let you go, Danny, the Times lawyer's assertion that this is about freedom of the press, that there could be big implications here. What do you make of that?
I was a little surprised that they were allowed to go into that in closing, because they're essentially saying to the jury, you know, hey, forget what we may have said. Think about the harm to all of journalism if you rule against us. I mean, this case is really just about, look at this article, look at the words, you've heard the testimony, and you've seen the emails from the Times internally. And I'm a little concerned for the Times, and they should be too, because they are going to be, the jury now has seen the innards of journalism, with the way we crash deadlines, the fast pace at which journalism and newspapers have to work to meet deadlines. And I wonder, will the jury be shocked at that? Will it jive with their pace of work? And will they think, oh, if you work that fast, it's got to be negligent. It maybe is even reckless. I'm not sure. But if you read the jury instructions objectively, Sarah Palin has a very difficult uphill climb.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Appreciate you explaining that to us, Danny. Thanks very much. Just ahead, we got some big news from Pfizer today. Its vaccine will not be available for children under 5, at least not for a while. What parents need to know, just ahead. Stay close. If you're a parent of young children ready to get them vaccinated against COVID, you'll have to wait a while longer. Pfizer pulled its approval application for kids under age 5. The company had its application in to the Food and Drug Administration, and the FDA was all set to publish its analysis of the Pfizer data as early as today. The go-ahead could have come within a few weeks. But that data was for a 2-dose vaccine. A few months ago, Pfizer said that did not generate a strong enough immune response in children between 2 and 4 years old. So now the company says it wants to wait for data on a 3-dose vaccine. That might provide a higher level of protection. Joining us now is Dr. Dean Blumberg, the Chief of Pediatric Infectious Diseases at UC Davis. Dr. Blumberg, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good evening.
So what do you make of Pfizer reversing course on its application?
Yeah, they weren't originally going to apply for approval until the FDA requested that. And it did seem awkward to me. I wasn't sure how that was going to work for the FDA to evaluate the 2 doses when the 2 doses we know weren't adequate in the 2 to 4 year olds. So I couldn't imagine that parents would want to go ahead and give those 2 doses, even though they're safe and well tolerated, not knowing yet what about that 3rd dose and is that going to be the right schedule. I think we need all the information before we roll this vaccine out at that age.
Dig into that a little bit more, because vaccine trials have to do with a number of things, whether they work, and also, you just mentioned safety and tolerability. There's been a whole lot of rhetoric, depending on what corner of the internet you hang out in, as to what medications do to kids and vaccines and COVID and various treatments. Dig in on that a little bit more in terms of what we know about how safe and effective these vaccines are for children.
So we're giving these vaccines to healthy children. So the bar is set very high in terms of safety. We have to make sure that these vaccines are safe and well tolerated. And we know that they are. Over 1 billion doses have been administered worldwide. And these vaccines are extraordinarily safe. They've been studied more than any other vaccine in the history of mankind. So that we need to make sure that these are safe, but we need to study them, make sure that we've got data on every age, including these young children. And fortunately, the preliminary data that they've presented has suggested it has been safe. I do look forward to seeing the FDA analysis of that. And then we need to make sure that the vaccines are effective. And the easiest way to do this is by the immunobridging data, by looking at the antibody response and making sure that it's the same or equivalent to older ages where we know that that antibody response is associated with protection. And unfortunately, in the 2 to 4-year-olds, the antibody response was suboptimal. The initial preliminary study suggested that they had chosen the right dose, 1/10 the adult dose. But when they did it in a larger group of children, they didn't get the antibody response that they expected. So it was back to the drawing board. Giving an extra dose is what they had proposed doing.
Talk about what you're seeing in your area. UC Davis is in Northern California, kind of right outside of Sacramento. What are you seeing in your area in terms of pediatric COVID? I imagine that for some parents, and I know at a lot of hospitals, these vaccines can't come soon enough. But what's it like where you are?
Yeah, we saw during the Omicron surge an increase in hospitalizations in children. Fortunately, many of these children weren't severely affected in terms of being in the ICU like we saw with the Delta surge, where we were seeing children who needed to be in the ICU on ventilators, sometimes with heart-lung bypass treatments. They were so severely ill. This time around, we were seeing kids on the hospital wards with more minor ailments like croup or bronchiolitis. And now we're seeing a decrease in the number of cases. The surge is over. But we do expect to continue to see an increasing number of MIS-C cases, the multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, because this does follow the peak by about 2 to 4 weeks.
I can imagine a parent saying, but just before I let you go, I can imagine a parent saying, oh, that's great news. The surge is over. These cases are going down. You're seeing more conventional illnesses that we're used to seeing in pediatric cases. Maybe I don't need to get my kid vaccinated now that this wave has kind of passed. What would you say to that parent?
Well, you know, we certainly are in a better place, and I'm pleased about that. And it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen with COVID, that's for sure, because we've been wrong before. But one thing I'm certain about is that we will see more surges. We're going to see more variants. We're going to see more surges. And I want to make sure that children are protected. More than 12 million children have been infected in the U.S. since the beginning of the pandemic. There's been more than 1,000 deaths. So I want to make sure that kids are protected.
Dr. Dean Blumberg of UC Davis, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you build a shiny new stadium in a city with warm weather, you're probably expecting to host the Super Bowl. That is exactly what Los Angeles will get out of its new stadium this Sunday. A recent study forecasts that the game could generate nearly $500 million of economic activity for LA and create as many as 4,700 jobs in the area. Plus, some Angelenos are probably digging the fact that they're hosting the Super Bowl with the home team on the field. CNBC's Jane Wells is on the ground at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. Hey, Jane.
The big game is almost here, and the banners are plastered all over Los Angeles. As per usual, past and present football players have switched from passing and receiving to pitching, as in pitching business relationships.
So I'm here with Visa today to represent small businesses, but nationwide their partnership with the league.
Everybody's trying to make a buck this week. For all of LA, the Super Bowl could mean several $100 million. And for the host city of Inglewood,
maybe 800,000, a million at the least.
For the second year in a row, the home team is in the Super Bowl. But it's a little different this time. Unlike last year during COVID, the stadium this year can be full, but there's not a feeling of fullness yet. The NFL experience is lightly attended. Corporate sponsors like EA and Nike have scaled back their presence. And the cheapest tickets on StubHub, they've fallen 30% to under $3,000.
I have friends asking me, when should I buy Super Bowl tickets? And the answer is always very complicated. But this year in particular, it's really complicated because we know that there's a big contingent of California fans that haven't purchased yet. And once they start purchasing, we expect that price to go up.
This is happening as the Rams are not only trying to win the Super Bowl, but win back Los Angeles. An entire generation here has grown up without a home team, and it shows at the games. The Rams are sparing no expense or effort to build a base, from handing out $25,000 grants to small businesses to pouring $5 billion of private money into the most expensive stadium in the world.
It's really about maybe we missed out on a couple of generations, but those 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, it's getting them to wear Cooper Kupp jerseys, Aaron Donald jerseys, so that nobody else ever grows up without a team to root for again.
But nothing may convert locals into Rams fans more than bringing home the Lombardi Trophy this Sunday. The Rams do have one advantage in this town. They have more fans than the Chargers, who also play here. Joshua?
Coming up, we'll talk curling with Team USA's John Schuster. And a few of my colleagues gave the sport a try with a friendly game of 2-on-2. You'll see who won when we come back. Before the Olympics started, many of you told us you were most excited for one sport, curling. Truth is, we were excited too. It's a sport lots of people watch, and several of you said you play. No better time to learn, right? So I went with my NBC News Now colleagues to the Bank of America Winter Village at Bryant Park for a quick lesson and some friendly competition.
4 years, it's a month of media madness and a month of people flooding in going, how do I do this? I've always wanted to try.
I grew up in Canada, I grew up curling, and I heard about the Brooklyn Curling Club, and I was really excited to come check it out.
In the swiping, it's much easier to pick up, and I do some really nice swiping, yeah.
The objective is to throw a stone about 150 feet, slide it down the ice, land it in that target, and accumulate as many of your stones as close to the center.
So our strategy is clearly fashion.
Matching outfits.
Matching outfits.
Mean winners.
Which will compensate for any lack of curling skills.
So how are we going to do against Joe and Savannah?
I have this deep down feeling that Savannah is going to be a breakout curling star.
Have you ever curled before?
No. I feel kind of confident.
Okay. What makes you feel confident?
I just watched for about 5 minutes. All right, let's do this.
All right, here we go. Woo!
Wish us luck. What's the biggest mistake the first-time curlers make?
Thinking they're going to succeed. All right, guys, welcome. So first, you're going to approach the hack from behind. You crouch down, then you put your foot on the slider. First move is you're going to lift your hips up. You're going to slide that foot back, heel to toe, don't go any farther. Then you're just going to push forward. Who's first?
So is the...
Yeah! Okay. Yep, looking good. Push and slide. Oh, there you go. Hey! Oh, man.
There you go.
Yeah!
Balance. There you go. Boom. Yeah, there you go. Hey, use that knee.
It's like the first scene of Bambi. That moment right there.
It's competition time.
That's right.
So you're each gonna get to throw 2 stones each. The person whose stone is closest to the center, you win. There you go.
I don't care if I fail if that thing moves. Get it.
Don't worry, Allison. I'm going to file a grievance with the Olympic Committee.
Thank you, please.
Oh, look at that go!
Woo! Yeah, Joe!
Let that go.
Don't do anything yet?
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, yes! No! Joe did it! You did it!
Oh, my gosh!
Oh, my goodness.
Yes!
There you go.
Sweep it now. Hit it. Hard. Woo! Yeah. Sweep that.
You told me to move in, and look how good he is! Oh, I feel like I'm doing a lot of the heavy sweeping here.
Oh, man.
That was
that alone.
Ready. Oh, what is happening?
Joe, what? Can I sweep? Do I sweep?
Wow.
Shut up!
ball. Shut up! Woo! Oh my God! Da-da-da-da-da.
I think we won.
We did win. We came in the mindset of Olympians.
We did. And we leave Olympic
True
medalists.
champions.
I would like to thank Minnesota because clearly just being from there made this possible.
Yeah. I'd like to thank the entire Morning News Now team who believed in us, who believed we would beat the other Now anchors, and we were able to bring it home because of that.
We believe very firmly in sportsmanship, so these medals that we brought ourselves, we're all winners.
Yeah.
We're all winners.
It was kind of you not to bring a silver one.
I feel like we're at a slight disadvantage because you were not taught how to sweep at the bullseye, the home, and I feel like that could have been helpful information.
Next time, we just got to focus on the fundamentals, start making the big plays.
Everyone was recording, trying to hear the rules and the lessons and to learn about it. It's really cool. Olympics bringing everyone together. I love it.
How did we do in our first try?
I mean, you guys looked a lot like the other curlers I teach on their first time out on the ice. You know, that first one is really shaky, but by the your third, fourth throw, you're looking really good.
I would do this again. Would you do this again?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, it's super fun. This and some broomstacking next time for sure.
And next time, we're going to bring the medals to them. Thanks to everyone here at Telemundo Center in Miami for taking such good care of us. We're back at plain old 30 Rock on Monday. But until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. Thank you for making time for us. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.